Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to compare the 2021 Sportster S to It's actually a 2020 1200 iron and it's a used bike, but there's been a few things done to this bike. We'll address that so that you know what's what in case you're not familiar with this model. But nothing changed on this motorcycle from 2020 to 2021. We just don't have a 2021. It's a crazy time right now, guys, because I would really rather compare this one to the 48 for a couple different reasons, but we don't have one of those either. So just to throw that out there, just to be transparent, this is a used bike. We'll point out any discrepancies that there would be in the new model, but we're gonna put these two in a comparison. They're both Sportsters, completely different machines, but I can see the same rider kind of trying to decide between the two, and we're gonna talk about why you might be torn on those in this video. All right, guys, so before we jump into this review, I'll do a quick walk around and let you kind of see both bikes just in case you're not familiar with them. I know the Sportster S still really new. Not a lot of people have had their eyes on them. Like I said before, this 1200 is a used bike. So actually really quickly, I don't want to get sidetracked, but let's point something out. The headlight has been changed on this bike, as well as the exhaust. Now it still looks pretty much like the factory exhaust. It's just got a much better sound with these Reinhardts on here. Tail lights have been smoked. And as far as I can see, just really quickly glancing over this, that's all that's been done to this bike that would make it different than a bone stock 1200 iron. Anyway, like I was saying, this really, guys, is an apples to oranges comparison in my mind. The reason that we're doing this review, the reason it made sense for me to take my time to do this review, was that both of these bikes carry the Sportster name, which after having ridden this bike, which I did a full review on, if you haven't seen it, I'll put the link down in the description of this video. I don't think this bike should have had the Sportster name. I think they should have done something different with it. Other than roughly its size and weight, I think it should have been called something else, because these are two very different animals, and in my opinion, aimed at two very different people. One of the reasons I could justify this, though, was that there's a $5,000 price difference on the two. So we're going off of Harley's MSRP. You want to call your dealership if you're interested in buying one, because prices are not necessarily MSRP right now, just based on, you can see, guys, these are all the new bikes Timms has on the floor right now. So there's 1, 6, so there's 7, and that makes 8 because that's a used one. I mean, there's 8 new bikes on the floor, and they're not sure how many more they're going to get. So because of that, some prices may change. Call your dealership, but we're going off of Harley Davidson's website, which says this bike has a $15,000 MSRP. That bike has a $10,200 MSRP. And as always, like, colors do make a difference. Black is always your cheapest option. But that's why we're doing this comparison, is because I want to point out a few things and see if you guys think, for your personal wants and needs, what you want out of a motorcycle, is this one worth $5,000 more than that one is. All right, so starting out on the front end, it's very apparent that the Sportster S, a little more sporty looking than this one, but beyond the looks, you do get the inverted front end, which I'm a big fan of. They're also adjustable up here. You have adjustments on both forks right here to fine tune that suspension to get the feel that you want. Your Iron 1200 is not gonna have the inverted forks, nor is it going to have any adjustment. So you're gonna get what you get out of that. There's no way to adjust it. You do have the single disc on both of these bikes. I love that only because I like the visual look of these wheels. It leaves the wheel more open and exposed, which I like. I'm a fan of dual disc. I've ridden both of these bikes. Plenty of stopping power, nothing to worry about, but worth pointing out. Headlights on this thing gonna be pretty different, kind of like the Fat Bob, more of an oval shaped versus the conventional round with your turn signals sticking off there. This, like I said, not the factory light that comes in the Sportster, but the factory light that comes on there is pretty good. Your turn signals are up there underneath the handlebars on your Mini Apes, whereas they're down there on this one. There's a lot of value in this front end. I'm just gonna say it, at least for me personally, and especially if you're performance driven, that inverted front end and having that adjustability goes a long way for me. Now, one of the things that the Sportster is known for is kind of the little smaller peanut tanks. The 1200 iron, no exception. This thing has a more shallow tank, but it looks a little longer. Not all of that is your gas tank though. So on your Sportster S model, you're gonna get 3.1 gallons. And on your 1200 iron, you're gonna get 3.3. Not a huge difference, but neither of these bikes, in my opinion, are long distance bikes. So about the time you're gonna need fuel, you would probably wanna take a break anyway. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Styling wise, tanks are very different. Fuel capacity, almost identical. Now, as far as specs go, it's really hard to translate on camera. Even when we drop it down, you can't really see. But your Sportster S has a 28 point something inch seat height, whereas your Sportster's 25 and some change. So there's literally 3 inches difference in height. So if you have a shorter inseam or you're a little more vertically challenged, the Sportster S may actually be a little tall, and as you can see, that seat's pretty low profile, so you're not gonna be able to change that. You could change the rear suspension, which is also gonna alter the performance of this bike, so I wouldn't recommend doing that. If you do it, don't go super aggressive. Just something worth pointing out. Also, your 1200 iron is gonna be about 60 pounds heavier running order weight. If you've been around bikes, you've ridden some bikes, you'll know 60 pounds not really gonna be that noticeable. So like if you have to pick up 60 pounds of something off the ground, yeah, pretty heavy. But riding a motorcycle, you don't really notice 60 pounds of difference. Slight performance, advantages to being a little bit lighter. But when you're talking about 60 pounds, unless you're going out and full on racing, not gonna be a huge deal. So like we said earlier, your 1200 iron comes with these Mini Apes, whereas you kind of have this low profile bar on the Sportster S. I'm 5'11", and I found that I'm kind of leaning forward just a little bit to get to these, whereas these feel pretty dang comfortable. Obviously can be rolled forwards and backwards. So can these, just not as a dramatic of a difference when you do that. On the iron, you have mid controls. On the S, you have forward controls. Point being, guys, 2 very different riding positions, and I know it's kind of hard to imagine without someone sitting on the bike, but this is gonna be a little more performance in the up top riding position, but typically the mid controls are more of a performance base for your controls, which there are mid controls available for the S model, but you're gonna spend $650 or so to get those, and then there's labor involved in that as well. So I would imagine it could easily get into $1,000 to change those to mid controls. Suspension on the back of the iron, I was very happy when Harley started doing these shocks on the Sportster. You see it's got the little dots as markers so you can kind of get both sides even, but comes with a little wrench. You just undo this lock nut, you can adjust your suspension, get it set up for your weight. If you're gonna have a passenger on there, factor in their weight, or if you're carrying luggage, real nice to be able to dial that in. However, on the S model, they've done the turn knob, which you literally just turn, you hear that click, that lets you know where you're at. Just a lot more simple to set than having to do the wrench, have to do both sides, make sure they're even, but you can adjust the rear suspension on both. I wanted to point that out since you're not able to adjust the front suspension on the iron. Now clearly we should address the engine on both of these bikes. So the engine that's on the iron, that thing has been around since the 60s. Obviously it's proven, it's one of the most popular little Harley engines out there. Tons of performance mods you can do to that thing. Really good, solid, reliable engine. However, I think its time has come, because in Europe you can no longer get the Sportster because of the emissions on that engine. I feel like California is probably not far behind on that, which is one of the things that I think led to them calling this a Sportster and putting this motor in there. I think the writing's on the wall for a Sportster. That's a different video, which I've already done. Is the Sportster dead? I'll put the link for that one down in the description as well. But as far as sound, night and day difference. But as far as performance goes, it's bigger than night and day, guys. This thing makes 120 horsepower, 94 foot-pounds of torque. And I almost wouldn't even want to give you guys the number on a stock Sportster when you compare it to this, because after hearing those numbers, it's not going to sound as impressive. And I'm going to tell you firsthand from riding both of these bikes, it's not going to feel the same. This is like a rocket ship. This is fun, it's quick because it's nimble, it's lightweight, it'll get up and go, but it's not a fire-breathing dragon like this thing is. Now, one of the big things I need to point out really quickly is this LCD display that they've done on this bike. Tons of information. So this bike has ride modes. There's also going to be all kind of things you can shuffle through. You're going to have your phone hooked to it for most of these. As you can see, navigation is not going to work without your phone. Music, same thing. And the music has to be played through your headphones or something. There is no speaker on this bike. I know that's confusing for some people. That's just going to give you some of the data about the bike, kind of what's going on with your air pressure, engine temp, battery, different diagnostics, things like that. And then all kind of settings where you can change the appearance of the screen and whatnot. Really nice. I love that Harley did this, and I really want to see that on the rest of the Harley Davidson models, at least the ones that don't have the big infotainment screens like the big touring bikes do. Now you contrast that to the good old trusty analog speedo here, and there are a few things that will come up on that little readout on the bottom. It's going to tell you what gear you're in. It's going to give you your RPM. You're going to get the total miles. So like I said, this is a used bike, 2,200 miles, barely ridden. Trip A, Trip B, your clock, and then back to your gear and RPM. So not a whole ton of information there. Definitely no navigation or anything else. So I really like that screen. Like I said, I hope they do it more. If this version of the Sportster lives on, I would absolutely love to see that screen make its way to this one as well. So before I give you guys my final thoughts, I'll do one more quick walk around just to kind of let you see both bikes. We'll do one at a time, starting with this Sportster S, just because it is new. And like I said, I'm honest, from the photos and videos I saw before it was completely released, I didn't love it. When it first showed up, I wasn't the biggest fan, but I've spent a good amount of time around this bike now. The more I look at it, the more I mess with it, the more I'm kind of warming up to it. I love the performance, don't get me wrong. Like, as far as performance goes, this thing won me over literally immediately as soon as I took off on it. Looks, taking me a little while to warm up to. I'll never love that thing, like I said, but hey, it is what it is, and I'm sure there'll be some options to fix that. So I'll give you guys the walk around of this iron. I mean, these bikes have been out forever. Most of you have probably already seen them, but if not, there's a good chance just to get a good walk around look at this bike. There's a reason Sportsters are so popular, you know, and they get a bad rap as sometimes they're a girl's bike or a beginner's bike. I've seen plenty of Sportsters that look great. I've seen Sportsters with 100 horsepower that are super fun to ride, super cool stuff. There are more parts available for Sportsters than any other model of Harley Davidson. So if you're looking to customize this thing as far as options go, you've got so many with something like the iron, whereas this S model that just came out this year, this is the first one that's touched down in this dealership. All you've got is the things that Harley makes, which they do. They have windshields and all the different, you know, change the grips and change some of the covers on the engine, and there's some other stuff you can do, but as of right now, Harley's going to be your only option, and they don't have nearly as many as they have for the iron. All right, so we've compared all the differences of these two models. Before I give you my opinion, I'd love for you to leave me a comment down below. Let me know which one you would go with and why. Or I'd be super interested to know if you happen to have a Sportster already and you're thinking about selling it or trading it in to get the new Sportster S. That would be very interesting to me. So let me know down below. Now, I spend a lot of time around motorcycles. I spend a lot of time in the dealership. So I've seen a lot of these 1200 irons. I've seen some of the custom stuff people have done. I've seen some really, really cool builds on Instagram. And I think this is a great platform if you want to build something super cool, super unique, make it completely your own. Now with that, if your biggest goal is to get all the performance you can out of your Sportster, well, out of the box, I think this one has got more than you would ever get this one to, short of doing some kind of big engine build and realistically probably throwing a turbo on this thing to get it anywhere close to the power and performance that this one has out of the box without spending any extra money. Now, as you know, I ride tons of bikes. I'm very fortunate that I get to do a lot of stuff up here at Timms. So I want you to take that into consideration when I give you my pick of these bikes. I get to ride a lot of stuff. So with that, I feel like I can kind of ride either a 1200 iron or something very similar anytime I want. These are pretty rare right now. It just came out. This is the first one Timms has gotten. I don't know how long it will take to sell, but I do know that I've been here pretty much since it came off the truck, and there's probably been 10 or so people look at it, several of them asking the price. So I can't imagine it's gonna be here a long time, and I don't know how many more Harley plans on sending them. So for those reasons, for the performance reasons, I personally, if I was gonna buy one of these two bikes, I'm buying the Sportster S. And that's only because it's so incredibly different than anything else in here or anything else that I've ridden. I think the uniqueness of it would just be something that I personally would be looking for. But like I said, I would like to hear from you guys which one you're going with and why. And as always, thanks for watching.